My name is Elara Vance. I'm 28 years old, and it's 2025 here in New York City. They said I'd never be as rich as my cousins, that I'd always be the one walking home while they drove past in their shiny cars. But what they never understood was that I wasn't chasing their wealth. I was building my own worth. Stay till the end, because what happened in that boardroom will make you rethink what success truly means. And if you love stories that awaken your soul, don't forget to subscribe for more like this. When I was younger, family dinners felt like quiet wars. The table would be full, laughter, wine, and stories of holidays in Paris or Rome. And then there was me, sitting there, pretending not to care, silently checking the time for the last bus home. I used to count coins under the table, praying no one noticed. Sometimes my cousin Chloe would smirk and say, "Elara, when are you taking us on a trip?" The table would burst into laughter, and I'd just smile, because what else could I do? I went home that night, and for the first time, I cried in the dark. Not because I was poor, but because I felt invisible. I promised myself that night, one day, I'd make them see me. Not through luxury, but through what I became. I started working 3 jobs after college. Days in a cafe, nights in a data firm, weekends freelancing for clients who barely remembered my name. Sleep was a luxury. Hope was my only constant. There were days I wanted to give up, especially when bills piled higher than my confidence. Once I overheard my aunt say, "Poor Elara, she's too proud to ask for help." She was wrong. I wasn't proud. I was just determined to earn my place in this world. Years passed. I failed over and over. My first startup collapsed within months. The second one never got funding. The third almost broke me. But every failure sharpened me. I learned to listen when others spoke, to observe what they missed, to find value where no one looked. I started building something different, a company that helped small creators sell their work online. I called it Rise Collective. It started with one desk in my bedroom and a laptop that overheated every hour. But it grew, slowly, silently, like roots beneath the ground. And then one morning, I got the email. A major investor, someone I'd pitched to years ago, wanted to meet. I remember standing in front of the mirror that day. I didn't see the girl who counted coins anymore. I saw the woman who made every coin count. When I walked into that boardroom, something inside me went still. The walls were glass, the lights too bright, and the chairs, the same style I used to clean at my first job. Then I saw them. My cousins. All 3, sitting across the table, working for the same firm that now wanted to buy my company. Time froze. They didn't recognize me at first. And when they did, I saw that flicker of disbelief. The same mouths that once laughed at me were now silent. "Miss Vance," the investor said, "we're ready to proceed if you are." I smiled, signed the papers, and in that moment I owned not just my company but my story. My cousins worked under that firm. Technically, they now worked for me. I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. Because real victory, it isn't loud. It's quiet, calm, and full of peace. It's standing in the same room where you were once underestimated and realizing you never needed to prove them wrong. You just needed to prove yourself right. I left the building that day and stood on the street, watching the city breathe around me. I thought of the girl on the bus, counting coins with trembling fingers. She didn't know where she was heading, but she kept moving. And that's the lesson I want to leave you with. Don't chase validation. Don't measure your worth by how fast others succeed. Keep walking your path, even when no one claps for you. Because one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just survive the pain. You turned it into your power. Every story has a moment when everything changes. This was mine. And maybe yours starts today. Subscribe for more stories that remind you your beginning doesn't define your ending. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in years, There was no alarm ringing in my ear, just silence. A kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I made a cup of coffee, opened the window, and watched the city move beneath me. People rushing to work, yellow cabs honking, the hum of a million dreams colliding in the same place. And I thought, this is what freedom feels like. But freedom, it doesn't mean the pain disappears. It just means you've learned how to carry it differently. I still remember that same night, my phone buzzing with messages from my cousins. "Congrats, Elara," one of them wrote. "Didn't think you'd make it this far." There was no malice in her words, but I could feel the weight, the quiet surprise hidden behind politeness. I typed a reply and then deleted it, because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Later that week, I had to attend my grandfather's birthday dinner. The same kind of gathering that once made me shrink inside myself. This time, I arrived early. Not to impress anyone, but to face the ghosts of who I used to be. As I walked in, I could almost hear echoes of old laughter, the ones that used to sting. But they didn't hurt now. They were just memories. "Look who's here," Uncle James said, lifting his glass. "The woman who bought half of Wall Street." Everyone laughed. It was friendly this time, not mocking. Chloe came over, the same cousin who once made those cutting jokes. She hugged me, awkwardly at first. "I'm happy for you, Elara, honestly," she said. And I could see it in her eyes. She meant it. Maybe success doesn't just change your life. Maybe it heals others, too. During dinner, Grandpa leaned closer. "You know," he said softly, "I always knew you'd do something big. You had your mother's eyes and her stubbornness." I smiled. It had been years since anyone mentioned my mother. She passed away when I was 16, another reason I had to grow up too soon. I wasn't sure I'd make her proud, I admitted. Grandpa looked at me, his voice trembling slightly. "She'd be proud not because you're rich, but because you never stopped being kind." That hit me. Because he was right, somewhere between failure and fortune, I had learned that kindness was the rarest currency of all. After dinner, I offered to drop Chloe home. The car was quiet for most of the ride, just city lights flashing across the windscreen. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You know, Elara, we used to make fun of you because we were scared." "Scared?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, you didn't play the game the way we did. You worked harder, stayed quieter, dreamed differently. It made us uncomfortable. I guess it's easier to laugh than to admit envy." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Because in that confession, there was truth. I realized then that people don't always laugh because they hate you. Sometimes, they laugh because they fear what you might become. When we reached her street, she turned and smiled faintly. "You proved us wrong, but more than that, you proved it's possible." And for the first time in years, I felt something even stronger than pride, peace. That night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window again. The city still roared below, but inside me there was only stillness. I thought about all the nights I'd cried quietly, all the mornings I'd dragged myself to work. And every moment, I thought I was too small to matter. But now I knew, none of it was wasted. Every tear, every rejection, every doubt, it had shaped me into someone unbreakable. People often ask what success feels like. It isn't the money, or the applause, or the headlines. It's that quiet second when you look at yourself and whisper, "I made it, and I didn't lose myself along the way." And maybe that's the real lesson. Don't run from your pain, learn from it. Don't chase to prove, build to become. And when the world underestimates you, smile. Because that's how every great story begins. The day after that dinner, I walked into my office, the place that had once been a dream on a crumpled piece of paper. Rise Collective now filled an entire floor in Manhattan. Glass walls, quiet hum of conversations, and a skyline view that felt almost unreal. But that morning, something inside me felt uneasy. Maybe it was the email waiting in my inbox. The subject line read, Acquisition offer GlobalNet Enterprises. GlobalNet, a corporate giant. They were offering to buy my company for a figure I couldn't even process at first. Enough to never work again. Enough to rewrite my life story completely. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. Then my heart began to race. This was everything I'd worked for, wasn't it? But somewhere in that excitement, a small voice whispered, "At what cost?" I called an emergency meeting with my core team, 5 people who'd been with me from the start. Aiden, my operations head, leaned forward. "Elara, this deal could put us on the global map. You'll be set for life." Mara, my creative director, frowned. "But they'll change everything, our model, our message, even our name." I looked around the room. Each face represented years of loyalty, sleepless nights, laughter through exhaustion. We built something human, not just profitable. And I wasn't sure I wanted to hand that over to a company that saw everything as numbers. "Let's take a day," I said finally. "No decisions yet." They nodded, but I could feel the tension. Everyone wanted security, except me. I wanted meaning. That night, I took a long walk through Central Park. The city lights shimmered off the water, and for a while, I just listened to the rhythm of footsteps around me. Joggers, lovers, dreamers, all chasing something unseen. I sat on a bench, thinking about the girl who used to count bus fare coins. She would have taken that deal without hesitation. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Still, fear crept in. What if saying no meant losing everything? What if success had an expiration date? My phone buzzed, a message from Aiden. "Think about it, Elara. You've earned this. Don't let emotions cloud the smartest move of your life." He meant well. But it made me realize something. The line between purpose and profit is thinner than anyone admits. The next morning, I was scheduled to meet the GlobalNet representatives. I almost canceled, but curiosity won. When I entered the conference room, a woman in a navy suit stood to greet me. "Ms. Vance," she said with a smile, "I'm Evelyn Stone, it's an honor." Her tone was polite, almost too polite. We shook hands, and she wasted no time. "You've built something remarkable," she said. "But imagine what Rise Collective could do with our resources, global reach, unlimited funding. You'd have creative freedom and financial security." Her words were smooth, perfectly rehearsed. But beneath them, I could hear the same promise that traps so many dreamers, comfort disguised as opportunity. Evelyn slid a folder across the table. "Our final offer, take your time." I opened it. The number was surreal, enough to silence any doubt. Except it didn't. I looked up, and what happens to my team, the creators who depend on us? She paused. "We'll review every department. Efficiency is our top priority." That was it. That single word, efficiency, hit me harder than I expected. Because I knew what it really meant. Layoffs, restructuring, soulless rebranding. I closed the folder slowly. "Thank you, Ms. Stone," I said quietly. "I'll think about it." Outside, the winter air felt sharp against my skin. I stood on the pavement, watching people hurry past, phones in hand, eyes on screens. Everyone moving, no one really seeing. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Our first office, the messy desks, the handwritten whiteboard goals. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And that's when I realized, maybe true success isn't about how much you sell something for, but how much of yourself you refuse to sell. Back at my apartment, I turned off all the lights and sat in silence. For the first time since that boardroom triumph, I felt uncertain again. Because success, I was learning, isn't a destination. It's a series of choices, each one asking, will you trade peace for power? Purpose for profit? Values for victory? And somewhere deep inside, I knew. This next choice would define not just my company, but who I'd become from here. Sometimes life gives you the same test twice. The second time, to see if you've really learned. And as I closed my laptop that night, I knew. The real battle wasn't with my cousins anymore. It was with myself. The next morning, the city was wrapped in fog, thick, heavy, almost symbolic. It felt like the world itself was asking me to pause before taking another step. I arrived at the office early. No one was there yet, just the soft hum of the lights, the faint smell of coffee, and the quiet echo of everything I'd built. I walked through the empty corridor, my heels clicking softly against the floor, and stopped at the glass wall overlooking the skyline. New York looked different that morning. It wasn't the city that had intimidated me once. It was the city that had raised me, tested me, broken me, and rebuilt me. I placed the GlobalNet contract on my desk and stared at it. Black ink on white paper, promising security, stability, and recognition. But to me, it looked like a mirror, reflecting the question I'd been running from. What does success really mean if you lose yourself in the process? A gentle knock on the door broke my thoughts. It was Mara, my creative director, the one who had believed in Rise Collective when it was just an idea. "You're early," she said softly, setting her coffee down. "So are you," I replied with a faint smile. She hesitated for a moment before asking, "Have you decided?" I looked at her, at the person who'd stayed through every failure, who'd worked unpaid when we couldn't afford salaries, who had called me at 2 a.m. to say don't give up. And suddenly, I knew the answer. "Mara," I said quietly, "we built this to give people a voice, not to sell hours." Her eyes filled with relief, maybe even pride. "You're doing the right thing, Elara." I nodded, though my heart was pounding. "Maybe, but it won't be easy." She smiled. "Nothing real ever is." At noon, the GlobalNet team arrived for the signing. Their briefcases gleamed, their smiles sharp as knives. Evelyn Stone entered first, confident as ever. "Ms. Vance," she greeted, "shall we proceed?" I gestured toward the chair across from me. "Actually," I said calmly, "there's something I need to say first." Evelyn tilted her head, curious. I took a deep breath. "I appreciate your offer, truly, but I didn't start Rise Collective to chase wealth. I built it to create space for people who have been ignored. Underestimated or silenced, people like me once." I slid the contract back toward her. "I'm declining." Her polite expression faltered for the first time. "You do realize what you're turning down?" "Yes," I said. "I'm turning down comfort to keep meaning." The silence in that room was almost sacred. Even the air felt still. After a moment, she stood, collecting her folder. "I'll admit, Ms. Vance, I didn't expect that, but perhaps that's why you succeeded in the first place." And with that, she left. When the door closed, I sat back in my chair. No applause, no music, just stillness. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop chasing approval and start living your truth. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed, a message from Aiden. "So, you said no?" I said yes, I replied. To myself. He sent a single thumbs-up emoji, and for some reason, that simple gesture made me laugh. That evening, the team gathered in the break room, pizza boxes, soda cans, tired eyes, and pure joy. We weren't celebrating money. We were celebrating identity. I raised my glass. To every time we failed, every time we were told no, and to the courage to say no ourselves when it mattered most. Everyone clapped, laughed, some even cried. And in that messy, imperfect little room, I felt richer than I ever had before. Later that night, as I walked home, I passed a girl sitting on the subway steps. Head down, sketchbook in hand, clothes worn but eyes bright. For a moment, I saw myself in her. I smiled, dropped a small envelope near her feet, and kept walking. Inside the envelope was a note that read, "Never let them convince you your dream is too small. Olivier." At home, I opened my journal and wrote just one line. "Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is say no to the life everyone else wants for you." Because that's what freedom truly is. Not having everything, but having the strength to choose what really matters. And as I looked out over the city lights, I realized something simple, something true. I wasn't rich because I owned a company. I was rich because I owned myself. It had been 3 weeks since I turned down the Global Net offer. 3 quiet, beautiful, and strangely uncertain weeks. The news had spread faster than I expected. Some called it bold, others foolish. But I didn't care. For the first time, I was living a life that didn't need explaining. And yet, life has a way of testing even the peace you earn. One Monday morning, while scrolling through emails, I noticed one marked personal, no subject. No sender name, just a string of numbers. Curious, I opened it. You don't know me, Elara, but your story saved me. I was about to give up on my dream until I watched your interview last month. I'm from Brighton. I've failed more times than I can count. But now, because of you, I'm trying again. Thank you. Elara. I sat back, reading the message again. It wasn't long, but it hit me harder than any award or headline ever could. Because that, right there, was the real reason I'd started all of this. Later that day, Mara came into my office, waving her tablet. Elara, you've got to see this, she said. She played a short clip, a young woman standing on a street corner holding a sign that said, Rise Collective saved my dream. It had gone viral. Thousands of comments, thousands of stories, people sharing how our platform had helped them take their first step, sell their first piece, or find their first bit of hope. I felt tears sting my eyes. Not because of pride, but because I realized something powerful. The company I almost sold had already become bigger than me. It was a movement. By evening, the office was buzzing. New creators signing up, old ones returning, partnerships forming. But amid all that chaos, my phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. It's been a while, hasn't it? I froze. I knew that number. I hadn't seen it in years. No name, but my heart already knew. Liam. My first business partner. My first heartbreak. The one who'd walked away when things got tough, taking half our early funding with him. For years, I'd told myself I'd moved on. But now, just seeing his message made old wounds ache. I hesitated before replying. Yes, a long while. He responded almost instantly. Saw the news. You made it, Elara, proud of you. I didn't know what to say to that. Proud, after vanishing when I needed him most. But before I could type another word, another message appeared. I'd like to meet. There's something you should know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the city lights flickering like restless thoughts. Why now? What did he want? And more importantly, why did a part of me still care? I thought about the last time I'd seen Liam. It was years ago, in a cheap cafe with flickering lights. We'd been 2 dreamers fighting the world, trying to make something out of nothing. Until the pressure broke us both. He said, You're too idealistic, Elara. You can't build a business on feelings. And I'd said, Then maybe we're not building the same thing. That was the last time I saw him. The next day, I told Mara about the message. She raised an eyebrow. You're not actually going to meet him, are you? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants closure. Closure, she said dryly, is just another word for curiosity. We both laughed, but she wasn't wrong. Still, something inside me whispered that I needed to hear whatever he had to say. That evening, I went to the cafe where it all began. Same flickering light, same corner table. Time had changed everything, except the way it smelled. Coffee, old wood, and forgotten dreams. He was already there. Older now, more serious, but those same eyes sharp, restless, ambitious. Elara, he said softly, you look different. So do you, I replied, sitting across from him. There was a long pause. Then he said, I owe you an apology. I didn't say anything, just listened. I left because I was scared, he continued. Not of failing, but of you succeeding without me. I couldn't handle it. I was selfish, and I've regretted it ever since. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. There was no anger left, just memories. I don't hate you, Liam, I said finally. You were part of my story, and maybe I needed that loss to become who I am. He looked down, relief flickering across his face. Then he handed me an envelope. This is what I came for, he said. I found something that belongs to you. Inside the envelope was an old notebook, worn, weathered, familiar. My handwriting on the first page. Rise, the dream begins. I felt my breath catch. I'd thought it was lost forever after he left. I kept it, he said quietly. I couldn't throw it away. I didn't deserve it, but you do. For a moment, the noise of the cafe faded. It was just the two of us, two different versions of the same dream, finally meeting again. I smiled faintly. Thank you, Liam. He nodded. I'm glad you didn't stop. As I walked out that night, snow began to fall soft, slow, like forgiveness itself. I clutched the notebook to my chest and whispered, maybe closure isn't an ending, maybe it's a new beginning. And as I walked through the quiet streets of New York, I knew this chapter of my life wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about reconnecting with what made me start. The hunger to create, the courage to feel, and the grace to forgive. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the same ones who remind you how far you've come. The morning after meeting Liam, I arrived at the office before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, mist hanging over the streets, the hum of traffic faint and distant. I sat by the window, holding the old notebook he'd returned. Each page was filled with ideas I'd written years ago, raw, wild, imperfect dreams. And somewhere between the ink stains and torn corners, I found the version of myself I'd almost forgotten. The one who didn't care about investors or numbers. The one who just wanted to create something real. But dreams, when they grow, come with shadows. And mine were about to get darker. By mid-morning, Mara stormed into my office, a look of concern on her face. Elara, you need to see this. She handed me her tablet. On the screen, a headline flashing across every major outlet. GlobalNet launches Rise Hub, a creator platform to rival Elara Stone's company. My stomach dropped. They'd done it. They'd copied our entire concept, the name, the features, even the design philosophy we'd pioneered. Mara scrolled down the page. They're using their massive resources to outprice us. Free membership, unlimited tools, celebrity collaborations. If this takes off, it could crush us. I took a deep breath. They want to bury us under our own dream. She looked at me, eyes sharp. What's the plan? I didn't answer immediately. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't sure. That evening, we gathered the leadership team. The room felt heavier than usual. Tom, our financial head, spoke first. If we try to match their pricing, we'll burn through our budget in 6 months. Mara added, if we don't, we risk losing our creators. Everyone turned to me. I could feel their hope and fear pressing down like weight on my chest. I stood up slowly. I didn't start Rise Collective to compete with giants, I said. I started it to help people rise. GlobalNet can copy our features, but they can't copy our purpose. The room went silent. We're not going to fight them with discounts or marketing tricks, I continued. We'll fight them with authenticity, with stories, with truth. Tom frowned. Stories don't pay the bills, Elara. No, I said softly, but they build loyalty, and that's something money can't buy. The next day, I launched a campaign called The Faces of Rise. We invited every creator, artist, and dreamer from our platform to share their journey, not as ads, but as real moments. No filters, no scripts, just truth. Within days, thousands of videos flooded in. People painting in tiny apartments. Musicians recording songs in borrowed studios. Mothers writing books at midnight after putting their kids to sleep. Each story carried the same heartbeat, hope. And slowly, something beautiful began to happen. While GlobalNet spent millions on ads, we grew through connection. Our hashtag trended worldwide. Journalists started calling it the digital revolution powered by humanity. But success comes at a price, and mine arrived one night as a phone call. "Miss Stone," said a voice I didn't recognize, "I'm calling from GlobalNet Legal. We believe your campaign infringes on certain brand assets similar to ours. If you don't cease distribution, we'll be forced to take legal action." I hung up before he finished. Typical. They couldn't beat our soul, so they wanted to scare it silent. Mara found me later, packing near the window. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just tired of people trying to own what can't be owned." She smiled faintly. "That's the fire I know." But the pressure didn't stop there. Two of our sponsors pulled out. Our website crashed twice due to traffic spikes we couldn't afford to handle. Investors started asking questions I didn't have answers to. And in the middle of that storm, I received another message, this time from Liam. "You're stronger than you think. Don't let them turn your purpose into a product." It wasn't advice, it was a reminder. And I needed it more than I cared to admit. A week later, we hosted a live event, our biggest one yet. I stood on stage, lights bright, cameras flashing. But instead of talking about profits or numbers, I told the truth. "I know the world sees us as underdogs," I said, "but maybe that's exactly what the world needs right now, a reminder that real dreams don't need permission." The crowd erupted in applause. Some people cried, others smiled through the screens. And at that moment, I realized something powerful. GlobalNet might win the market, but we were winning hearts. When I stepped off stage, Mara hugged me. "You just gave them something no corporation ever could, belief." I smiled. Belief is contagious. That night, as I returned home, the city lights looked different. Not distant, but alive, like they were breathing with me. I opened my old notebook again. On the last page, I wrote one simple line. "Purpose is louder than profit." And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace, not because everything was okay, but because I finally knew who I was, even in the chaos. Sometimes, the world doesn't need another company. It needs a reason to believe again. And maybe that's what I was born to give. The morning began quietly, almost too quietly. New York's skyline glowed gold through my window, the kind of light that usually fills me with calm. But that day, calm felt like a lie. Something was off. When I entered the office, Mara was already there, staring at her laptop, eyes tense, lips pressed tight. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "What's going on?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. An email thread. Dozens of messages between one of our senior developers, Ethan, and a GlobalNet executive. They weren't just talking, they were sharing files. Confidential ones. My chest went cold. "You're telling me Ethan's been leaking our code?" Mara nodded slowly. "For weeks, maybe months, he was part of our core development team, Elara. He had access to everything." I sank into the chair beside her, silence heavy between us. This wasn't just betrayal, it was an open wound. I called Ethan into the meeting room an hour later. He walked in looking nervous but not guilty, which somehow made it worse. When I slid the printed emails across the table, he froze. "Elara, I can explain." "No," I said quietly. "Don't explain, just tell me why." He looked down, fidgeting with his hands. "GlobalNet offered double the salary. They said they'd help me grow faster. I thought maybe I could bring something back, learn from them." By selling us out, my voice broke. He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, I swear." Mara stood in the corner, arms folded. "You gave them our prototype files. That's not learning, Ethan, that's betrayal." He looked at me then, eyes full of regret. "You once told me this company was built on second chances. I just hoped you mean that." For a long moment, no one spoke. I wanted to shout. I wanted to demand why loyalty always came with a price tag. But instead, I just whispered, "Second chances are for mistakes, not choices." He left without another word. And the moment the door closed, I felt the full weight of what had just happened. That night, I stayed in the office alone. The screens glowed around me like silent witnesses. I kept replaying everything. The trust I'd given, the hours we'd built together, the way people can switch sides the moment they see glitter. I opened my old notebook again, tracing over one line I'd written years ago. People don't leave because of failure. They leave because of fear. Maybe Ethan wasn't the enemy. Maybe fear was. But that didn't make the damage any less real. The next morning, I gathered the team. They already knew. Whispers travel faster than truth. I stood in front of them and said, "Yes, someone betrayed us, but that doesn't define who we are. We didn't come this far to break at the first crack. We came this far because we believed in something bigger than one person's greed." Someone in the back murmured, "But they have everything now, our code, our ideas." I nodded. "Maybe, but they still don't have us. They can copy what we build, but they can't copy how we build it with heart." A few people smiled faintly. And in that moment, I knew the company was still alive, not perfect, not untouched, but alive. Later that day, Liam called. He'd heard the news somehow. He always did. "You sound tired," he said gently. "I am," I admitted. "I feel like I'm building a house during a storm. Every time I fix one wall, another collapses." He paused. "Then maybe stop trying to build walls, build roots instead." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Walls keep people out, Elara. Roots hold them together." I didn't reply, but his words stayed with me long after the call ended. That evening, I took the train home instead of my car. The city felt different through the window, softer somehow. I watched strangers laughing, arguing, living. And I realized something simple but powerful. Every person out, there was fighting a battle no one saw. And maybe that's what connected us all, the quiet courage to keep going, even when the world doesn't notice. When I reached home, I turned on the lamp, sat by the window, and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't mean trust again. It means freeing yourself from their weight." I didn't forgive Ethan that night, not yet. But I forgave the part of myself that believed success could ever be without heartbreak. Because every empire, no matter how bright, is built on lessons carved out of pain. And mine was still being written. The rain came down hard that night, steady, cold, and relentless. New York looked blurred behind the glass, lights dissolving into streaks of gold. I sat in my office long after everyone had gone home, the sound of rain mixing with the low hum of the city. We were barely holding on. After Ethan's betrayal, 2 investors had frozen funding. Our campaign was still popular, but popularity doesn't pay bills. I scrolled through the company's balance sheet again, line by line. Red numbers everywhere. And then, as if the storm wasn't loud enough, my phone rang. The caller ID made my heart skip. Global Net Corporation. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, and maybe a touch of defiance, made me swipe the call open. A smooth voice greeted me. "Elara Stone, this is Julian Crane, Global Net's Vice President of Development." I leaned back, calm but guarded. "I know who you are." He laughed lightly. "Good, saves me the introduction. I'm calling because I think we've both lost enough time fighting. What if we didn't have to?" I frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "A merger," he said simply. "Your team joins ours. You'll retain creative control, but under our funding and resources. Think about it, no more struggles, no more leaks, no more fear. Just results." For a moment, the offer sounded tempting. Relief, stability, safety. Everything I'd been craving since this journey began. But then I remembered the faces of my team. People who'd stood by me when we had nothing but belief. People who trusted me, not the money. I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Mr. Crane, but Rise Collective wasn't built to be owned." There was silence, then a soft chuckle. "You'll change your mind, Miss Stone. The world doesn't reward stubborn dreamers forever." The line went dead. And for a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the reflection of myself in the glass. I looked tired, but not defeated. The next morning, I told Mara about the offer. She listened quietly, then crossed her arms. "So, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that maybe we've been trying to survive when we should be evolving." Her brow furrowed. "You're not considering the merger, are you?" "No, but I'm considering something else, expansion. If GlobalNet wants to play big, we'll go deeper. We'll launch Rise Education, a free branch that teaches creators the skills we've learned the hard way." Mara blinked. "For free? We can't even pay for." "We'll get sponsorships, grants, partnerships with universities. I'll call everyone I know." She sighed, half smiling. "You're impossible, you know that." "Maybe," I said, grinning faintly. "But impossible is where miracles begin." The next few weeks were chaos. I worked through nights, slept in short bursts, met investors who barely believed in the dream until they saw the fire in my eyes. Slowly, one by one, small partnerships began to form. We started releasing free online workshops. The response was overwhelming. Thousands signed up, not just creators, but students, teachers, even parents looking for new ways to build something meaningful. Rise Education wasn't just a project anymore, it was a movement. And the irony, GlobalNet tried to copy it, but people saw through them this time. Because truth has a tone. And theirs didn't sound like ours. One evening, Mara came running into my office, breathless. "Elara, you need to see this." She turned on the projector. It was a live broadcast. Julian Crane, GlobalNet's VP, was on stage announcing that their new platform, RiseHub, would be shutting down indefinitely. He called it a strategic withdrawal. I stared at the screen, stunned. The same corporation that once tried to crush us had given up. Mara turned to me, wide-eyed. "You did it." But I shook my head slowly. We did it. And not by fighting harder, but by staying true to who we were. A week later, I stood in front of my team in our small but bright office. No suits, no big speeches, just truth. "I know this hasn't been an easy road," I said. "We've been betrayed, tested, and underestimated. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: real success isn't about beating others. It's about becoming someone you're proud to see in the mirror." The room filled with quiet nods and smiles. Even Ethan, who had returned weeks ago to apologize, stood in the back, eyes lowered in humility. I caught his gaze for a second and simply said, "We learn, we grow, we move on." He nodded, tears in his eyes. That night, I went for a walk along the East River. The rain had stopped, the air crisp and alive. Lights shimmered on the water, reflections dancing like tiny fires. I thought about everything: the girl who once counted coins for a bus ride, the woman who now ran a company built on purpose, not profit. I whispered to the wind, I made it. Not because I was rich, not because I'd won, but because I never gave up on me. Soft cinematic music fades in. They said I'd never be as rich as my cousins. But wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by what you build and who you become while building it. And tonight, I finally feel rich. Sometimes betrayal is the end of trust. It's the beginning of wisdom. And wisdom is how we rise higher the next time we fall. The sun rose gently over Manhattan's soft gold, spilling across the skyline, painting glass towers with warmth. It should have felt like victory. After months of fighting storms, Rise Collective was thriving again. Partnerships were rolling in, creators were growing, and for the first time, peace didn't feel like a stranger. But peace can be strange when you've lived in battle too long. I stood by the window of my office, coffee cooling in my hand, and asked myself a question I hadn't faced in years. What now? For so long, my purpose was clear: to prove them wrong, to rise from nothing, to become someone worth noticing. And now that I had, I didn't know who I was without the fight. Later that morning, Mara burst into my office with her usual energy. "Elara, you've been invited to speak at the Global Business Summit next month. They want you as the keynote." I blinked, the same event my cousins attend every year. She grinned. "Exactly, poetic, isn't it? You'll be on the main stage, they'll be in the audience." I smiled faintly. "Poetic, yes, but also terrifying." "Terrifying is good," she said. "Means it matters." For the next few weeks, I buried myself in preparation, not for the speech, but for what it meant. I wasn't the girl they used to mock anymore. I was the woman they'd have to listen to. But deep down, I wondered, if I stood on that stage and looked them in the eyes, what would I even say? See, I made it. No, that wasn't me anymore. One evening, I went for a walk through the old neighborhood where I'd grown up. The streets hadn't changed much, cracked pavements, corner shops, children chasing footballs. And yet, everything felt smaller than I remembered. I stopped in front of the bus stop, where I used to count coins after those family dinners. The memory hit hard, the laughter of my cousins echoing in the background, the taste of quiet humiliation. I remembered promising myself that one day, I'd never feel that small again. But standing there, I realized something. It wasn't about being small or big. It was about being true. That night, I started writing my speech. Not a script, a confession. I once believed success meant having more money, more recognition, more power. But the truth is, success is when you stop needing to prove anything. When peace feels louder than applause. I wrote and rewrote those lines until dawn. They felt simple, but real. And that's all I wanted now, real. The day of the summit arrived. The ballroom was enormous, chandeliers glittering, journalists buzzing, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Mara squeezed my hand before I walked on stage. "Go show them what real looks like." I smiled, not what they expect, what they need. The lights dimmed. The host introduced me. Elara Vance, founder of Rise Collective, a visionary leader redefining the meaning of success. As I stepped into the spotlight, 1,000 faces blurred before me, but among them, I saw them. My cousins, perfectly dressed, whispering among themselves. My heart pounded. But when I began to speak, my voice was steady. "My name is Elara Vance. I'm 28 years old, and I grew up believing that success belonged to others. I was told I didn't have the right background, the right connections, or the right kind of family. And maybe they were right, because what I had was something else. Hunger." A hush fell across the hall. That hunger built everything you see behind me, not out of luck, but out of lessons. Lessons from failure, from betrayal, from silence. And somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing success and started defining it. I looked directly at my cousins then, not with anger, but with peace. Real wealth isn't about what you own. It's about what you create, what you share, and who you become when no one's watching. The crowd erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. Because inside, all I felt was calm. For the first time, I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking for me. After the speech, people crowded around, shaking hands, asking for interviews. But the moment that mattered came quietly. As I stepped off stage, one of my cousins, Amelia, approached me. Her eyes were glossy. "Elara, I didn't know you'd been through all that. We were kids, stupid and proud. You turned it into something beautiful." I smiled softly. "We all grow in different directions. I just chose to grow through the pain." She nodded, tears escaping. "I'm proud of you." And in that moment, years of buried hurt melted away. Forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. That night, I returned home, kicked off my heels, and sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city outside glittered quietly, not like a prize, but like a reflection. I whispered to myself, This is what peace feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough. Sometimes you climb a mountain, thinking the view at the top will change you. But when you get there, you realize the mountain didn't make you. The climb did. And I'm still climbing, not for them anymore. For me. Elara stood by the tall glass window of her office. The city stretched before her, shimmering lights, busy streets, and the hum of a world that once ignored her. The reflection staring back at her wasn't just a successful woman in a designer suit. It was the story of every sleepless night, every tear, and every moment she almost gave up. The board meeting had ended an hour ago. Her cousins had sat silently across from her, eyes lowered, unsure if they should speak or stay quiet. For years, they had been the stars of the family, the ones destined for greatness. But now, they reported to her. It wasn't revenge she felt. It was something deeper, something softer. When the elevator door closed behind them, Elara sat still for a long time. She remembered the small apartment where she started peeling paint on the walls, the sound of traffic outside, and her mother's tired smile. Success will come to those who stay kind, even when the world is. Those words had stayed in her heart like a prayer. Now, sitting in a building that bore her name, she finally understood what her mother meant. Elara didn't celebrate by posting her victory online or showing off her wealth. Instead, she walked out into the evening rain, without an umbrella, without fear. The cool drops touched her face, mixing with tears she didn't know were still there. At the corner cafe, she saw an old man struggling to carry boxes. Without thinking, she stepped forward and helped. He looked at her, surprised. "Thank you, miss. Not many stop these days." Elara smiled. "I used to know what it feels like to be invisible." That night, she sat by her window again, watching the rain fall over the city she'd conquered. But in her heart, she felt something bigger than triumph peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from owning a company, but from owning your story. She realized something powerful. Life doesn't reward the loudest voices or the richest names. It rewards the ones who keep going, even when no one's watching. The next morning, her phone buzzed. A message from her cousin, the same one who once mocked her shoes at a family dinner. It said, "I'm sorry, Elara. You proved us all wrong. You deserve everything you've built." She stared at the message for a long moment, then replied simply, "No, I didn't prove you wrong. I just proved myself right." Musical note music swells softly, hopeful, cinematic. Weeks later, Elara launched a scholarship program in her company, the Second Chance Fund, for students who came from poor families, the ones who were always told they'd never make it. She didn't just want to be rich. She wanted to build bridges where walls once stood. Her story spread quietly online, not through flashy ads, but through the people she'd helped. "Who is Elara Vance?" they ask. And someone would reply, "She's the woman who never forgot where she came from." Years later, when a young woman named Ava, a scholarship recipient, stood on stage as the CEO of her own startup, she said, "I once read about a woman named Elara Vance who turned every no into a beginning. Her story taught me that failure is not the end. It's a compass pointing to where you truly belong." Elara watched that speech from home, smiling softly. The cycle had begun again, not of envy or revenge, but of inspiration. She leaned back in her chair, the morning light spilling through the window, touching her face with warmth. The world had finally caught up to her truth. That greatness isn't about being better than others. It's about being braver than yesterday. They said she'd never be as rich as her cousins, but Elara Vance built something far greater, a legacy that money could never buy. They said she'd never be as rich as her cousins. But Elara Vance didn't just chase wealth, she chased purpose. In a world that laughed at her silence, she found power in patience. In a world that measured worth by money, she measured hers by meaning. Every sleepless night, every failure, every tear, became the bricks that built her empire, not of glass and gold, but of kindness, courage, and faith in her own story. Years later, people didn't remember her for what she owned. They remembered her for how she made them feel. And that is the kind of success that never fades. Because in the end, Elara proved something timeless. That riches can fill your hands, but purpose fills your soul. Your value isn't defined by where you start, but by how you rise.